So I would ask this of anyone who has any beliefs about anything. Is it working well for you? Do you feel love moving through? Do you feel witnessed? Do you feel fulfilled in your soul's journey? Do you have a sense for what your soul's journey is all about? And if the answer is no or not so much to any of those questions, then that's a wonderful invitation to re-examine. Most of the work for me in channeling has been getting out of my own way so that I can make space for what wishes to come through: love, source, divine energy, connection, spiritual contact. That's something we can all do. If you want to learn to channel, you can. I tell people, I can't teach you how to channel like me, but I can teach you how to channel like you.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Good morning, evening, afternoon, magical beings. Welcome back to the show. And I'm so excited to have you here today. I'm so excited to share a magical being with you today and talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. But as always, before we get into all of that, a lovely reminder for all of the returning souls and the new souls here today. If you get a bit of value and guidance and love out of this chat, please share this far and wide with a family member, a lover, a friend that you think it can support and guide. If you have your own comments, feedback, perspective, or just some love you want to share, the best way you can do this with the show is heading over to Apple and Spotify and leaving your feedback over there. And make sure you stick around to the end of this show because my lovely guest, Stephanie, is going to have a lot to say and a lot of gems to drop. Speaking of Stephanie, I do have the lovely Stephanie Banks here with me today. Stephanie is a powerful intuitive channel. She's a mentor and a guide who's helping souls around the world connect back in to their powerful inner space. We are going to talk about what it means to be an intuitive channel, but through the lens of your mystical right brain today. We'll talk a little bit about some of the brain science, the right and the left brain aspects, the connection to your heart, ego, mind, the unconscious, and so much more. Stephanie, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you so much, Harrison. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
We were just having a quick little chat about all the beings in your world and your lovely dogs. And I guess maybe this is where we can start, my friend, because it's coming through. As a channel, as an intuitive channel, I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of is our energy and more specifically our sensitivities, right? Because I've noticed, and this is what I would love to get your view on, the deeper I've opened up my channel, the more sensitive I've become to the world around me. So I'm wondering, Stephanie, as we get this chat started, what are your thoughts on that? How, as a channel, can we learn to balance that in a world where there's a lot going on?
You've noticed that. Same for me. You know, the more I do this work and the more I serve and the more I go deep into the space of receiving, the more that's required of me to keep a clear energetic field. Like the work becomes more involved. I need more time to dedicate to it. I need to change up my practices so that I am receiving, tapping into the highest. What worked for me 6 months ago doesn't necessarily work for me in the ideal way anymore. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes it just falls a little short. Sometimes it just feels flat. So this is what I feel about the intensity of our planet right now and humanity upon it, and the desperate and destructive nature that we find ourselves in at the moment is it's going to require more of those of us who are bringing and shining light so that we can keep amplifying that light in the desire to help to balance what needs balancing, which is us, which is ourselves as humans, and to awaken to what we're here to do, how we're here to serve and love and be. So I had said to you in the beginning, I just pray my dogs don't bark during our time together. And you so kindly said, it's okay. I'm very used to all sorts of beings in the background doing this work. And just the expansiveness and allowing and acceptance of that put me at ease. And that's just one example of how we can be in service to each other and in the acknowledgement of one another.
It's beautiful. So let's flow from there with everything you just said, Stephanie. And I'll pull out this is one of my favorite topics, and I would love to get your views on this. And then I want to go into all things brain, because that's really a big theme of a lot of the work you're doing now in the world that I want to hear about. But you mentioned entities and beings around us, and you gave the example of the dogs that we were just talking about and other physical people. But as you very well know, as we start to open up our intuitive channel, we attract entities in the non-physical form, in the non-physical world. And some of those entities aren't there for the highest good. So I'm wondering, and this might take us down a rabbit hole, and we'll see where it goes. But what advice would you give to people tuning in that are looking to open their intuitive channel? How do we be mindful of maybe attracting in entities that are not there to aid us?
It's an excellent question, and everybody wonders about this. And I believe it's something that prevents a lot of people from diving into their intuitive work, because the fear of being too open and being permeable to lower frequencies is it's a thing, a real thing. So what I believe is that we will always attract what is a vibrational match to where we are. And so this is universal law. I'm not coming up with this on my own. And if that's the case, and I do believe that it is, then the higher frequency we carry, and that is a result of our self-care and our self-love and our self-compassion, will be a match for the highest frequency energy. And when the self-care is non-existent, or we are in self-criticism or in the lower frequencies, then we are more susceptible to attracting that in. And so it really is a responsibility that we have to know ourselves, recognize when we feel off, maybe don't do certain things, or do certain things when we are feeling in the lower frequencies, to recalibrate that. It's an ongoing process. I'm not always in the absolute highest frequency. I have my rough moments and down days too. And in those times, I'm responsible to reschedule sessions or to avoid certain conversations and to come back to my center. And
it's so
self-care.
important. I'm so happy that you brought up this word of responsibility, because it's so right what you're saying in regards to this fear of these, let's just say it, right? I think where people go straight away is the Hollywood perception of demonic entities that are out there to get us. And I think, and I say this with love and compassion to people listening, a lot of this comes from religious programming, that these evil demonic entities are out there, and they're waiting around the corners to come and get us. And while there are some semblance of truth in that, as Stephanie just highlighted, what we overlook is our role in that attraction, our role in not just the attraction of the negative, demonic, lower frequency entity, but also our role in being able to transmute and support, and not just maybe I'll get your thoughts on this, my friend, and then we'll switch into brain stuff, but not just bring up our frequency so we can release maybe some of those entities, but also aid that demonic entity, aid like our light being supportive for that entity that we are attracting in, right? Because I think that is something we overlook. We think that those things are out there to get us. And again, maybe there are some things to be said about that, but I think the bigger picture is most of those lower frequencies are in a lower frequency for a reason. And when we can share our light with them, it raises them up and aids them into an ascension process. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I love what you said. I'm just going to take that on as my own belief system. The truth is that I don't give a lot of thought to the lower frequencies. Maybe it's because I've been channeling for a while and it's not so much a concern of mine anymore. But I love what you said, every bit of what you said. It's a beautiful way to look at it. And you're right. We've been fed a lot of fear, sometimes from religious institutions, sometimes from family fear, ancestral stuff. I don't actually, I might be unpopular for saying this, but I don't necessarily believe in demonic forces as it is, or as it's described. Energy is energy, and it's of different frequencies. And if something feels not right or not well or not healthy or not for you, then it's because it's not. And you do not have to engage in that. I learned in my practice early on that just because I could chant for anyone doesn't mean that I should.
Yeah.
So I made an agreement with my guides who are able to weed things out for me. And so the people who come to receive my work are a vibrational match for me. And we can do that in so many different areas of our lives.
Yeah. I think we might have to have a separate conversation about all things entities and this whole topic, my friend, because there's more questions I could ask you here, but I do want to speak about the brain, because I think I know this is a big theme in your world at the moment, and there are some components here that I think are going to be very supportive to people listening. So let's start with a simple question that we'll go deeper into. What, in your opinion, my friend, where does the brain come into this conversation around channeling and being an intuitive channel, and where can we start this chat?
Well, the really cool thing about the brain that I'm excited to share is that, of course, we have two hemispheres of the brain. We have a right side and a left side, and each side has very distinct characteristics and perspectives and roles. And once we learn the different roles, then we can actually choose which side we are going to use to engage. For example, the right hemisphere is our intuitive side. And so that is what I'm using when I channel. It's receptive, it's expansive, it's creative, it's trusting, it's playful. That's where I want to be when I am receiving messages from spirit, when I am in deep conversation with people. So I choose to use that side. When I want to speak clinically or analytically, say when I was working in my hospital job as a clinician, I use my left hemisphere a lot. It's designed for that. It thinks linearly. It thinks critically, analytically. It's thinking about the past and the future. It's oriented with structure and function. It's amazing. So we can actually choose which side we engage. And that's where a lot of us get hung up, I think, is that we live in a culture that places such a high value on the left hemisphere with its critical analytical thinking. And then we have, I believe, these underdeveloped right hemispheric tools that we don't engage. And so they go underutilized and untapped.
Ooh, so much coming up already. So I'm just really excited for you, my friend. And I can feel your passion within this topic, but I can also see and appreciate the need for it. And I think a big part of the need is what you're alluding to, is the priority, the prioritization of the left, right? The structure, the analytical, beautiful side of us. But for some reason, and this is my next question for you, my friend, for some reason is the way, and I'm using my fingers here, is the way of viewing the world, viewing this beautiful dance that we are having with the universe, this co-creative dance. We are only viewing it through the left. So, and I'm also aware that this is a potential rabbit hole, but I want to see what comes up for you, my friend. Why do you think that is the case? Why do we live in a society where the left is so prioritized?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Wow. There's
What is Spirit saying in this moment, my friend?
well, first I'd say I historically there are so many reasons why this makes sense for us to be overly reliant on our logical side. And this is the side oftentimes that we go to for survival, right? It helps us to gather food. It helps us to measure things. It helps in so many organizational ways. So it could be that we, through just repeated, maybe even overuse, have gotten into such a habit that that's our go-to for almost all things. Then there's the rabbit hole of patriarchal culture, right? And if we look in terms of right and left, oftentimes the right will be the feminine.
Yeah.
The left might be the masculine, outward directed, goal oriented, feminine, receiving, creative, etc. So we can look at it from that perspective. I'm gonna propose that it's been a habit that we have not questioned.
Yeah.
And it has been that which has brought us to this very dire point on the planet where we are now faced with a choice whether or not humanity will survive and other species will be protected and survive as well, or not.
Yeah. I love that. I think a habit that we haven't questioned. It brings up the Jung quote that I'm sure you're familiar with. The unconscious, we will. Oh, I just lost it. The unconscious will project on. I'm going to paraphrase this. The unconscious will continue to project onto the outside world, and we will perceive it as fate, right? The unconscious inside of us, these unconscious habits that you just talked about, that we're not bringing illumination, loving illumination to. If we're not bringing our inner awareness to it, it will project onto our outside world, and we will think that we have free will, but in reality, we're just moving through these old traits and creating a reality based off those old traits. And this really, the next point here I want to sort of pose within this question, I think this choice and this habit that we are living from the left side is connected to an unhealthy ego. And what I mean by that is the ego is a part of us and should be loved. And I would also assert that the ego is representative on both sides of the brain, the left and the right. However, like you alluded to, a lot of us have a lot of unprocessed trauma and wounds, whether it be inner child, ancestral, or further back. And because of, and this is what I want to get your views on, because of those wounds and that pain, those wounds and pain are holding us in that unhealthy ego. And rather than opening up to our intuitive channel and our right feminine soothing, we're staying in the control of the left brain and staying within that unhealthy ego. Does that resonate at all, my friend? Do you agree?
I do agree. That resonates very deeply. I don't ever remember learning that I was my own healer
Yeah.
until I became an adult.
Yeah.
And we are trained to look elsewhere for experts, practitioners to perform healing for us. And once we learn that that exists within us, it is a whole new world, and it allows us to tap into something very, very different. But yeah, there's the trauma that requires healing, and the willingness to look into that. It requires a lot of courage and support. And a lot of people may not have that support or courage at certain moments.
Yeah. And it's when I see people that are running the world, and I think we could all have an example of one of those people pop into our minds in this moment, right? And it shows us an example of what we're saying today, of people being dominated by this left brain, masculine ego, unhealed ego way of being. I think that is the response we should all be taking, is one of compassion, right? One of, oh, that hurt people. That person is not just unconscious, like we've been saying, unconscious of their habits that they keep on making, but they're unconscious in their pain. So it's instead of meeting fire with fire, it's meeting that pain with love, right? Stephanie, I'd love to hear you explain and highlight a beautiful example of what we're talking about here today. And a guest that I have on my bucket list to have in the future is Dr. Jill Bolte. Is that how you pronounce her last name? Dr. Jill Bolte. And she has a really wonderful story that I would encourage people to look into. But I'd love to hear you speak about it to a degree, my friend, from your understanding of her story and how it really connects to what you're passionate about at the moment and what it highlights in what you're saying today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's one of the most influential people whose work in the world has really affected me. So her full name is Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, and she's a neuroanatomist who at the age of 37, I believe, had a stroke in her left hemisphere. So essentially, we have a clinician, a neuroanatomist who studies the brain, who is now studying her own brain while it's going offline from a brain bleed. And she wrote 2 books, both of which I highly recommend. Her most recent one is called Whole Brain Living, and she breaks down the brain into 4 different characters, each side having 2 characters, and they sort of mirror each other in terms of their location. And what I've learned from her and how her work has influenced me is it has bridged a clinical approach, so a logical approach, the left brain approach to intuition and to inner knowing that for me had been missing before. When she had her stroke, none of the functions that the left hemisphere naturally handles could be handled anymore. It didn't have the ability to because of the stroke. So she was completely in her right hemisphere. And so she felt like she was part of everything. There were no boundaries to her skin, to her body. There was no change in, she was everything. She experienced the oneness. And to hear her describe it, she has a brilliant TED Talk, is so, it's powerful. And she knows from having lived that is possible in our world right now. We don't have to have a stroke to live from this place of interconnected, loving, beautiful oneness. And that's the mind-blowing part of all of this is that possibility that we have that available to us right now if we want to practice some different ways of thinking and being.
Can I ask, Stephanie, how how her story, her example, her soul, and just to add this in super quick, it if anyone needed an example of predetermined lives that exist for a reason, I think her her example is that, right? If you, and I love you, if you're fit into this persona of you don't really believe in, predetermination and having a soul's mission, it'd be very hard to look at her and not see that, right? And see not just the role in her own life that she's awakened to, but the role that she is a part of this collective, this oneness that we're all a part of, and what she's been able to do for all of us. So I'm on that thread, my friend. Can I ask, how has she impacted your world? How has she impacted this work that you're now doing with the brain, with the intuitive channeling? What has shifted for you?
She made it possible for me to find language to speak about this work in a way that could be received and more acceptable, I will say, to my left brain siblings, fellow humans. I have struggled with this in personal ways. I was in a marriage where there wasn't room for this part of me. And part of the struggle with the intuitive channeling part of me, part of the struggle was that I had a hard time explaining what I did to someone who was very much left brain oriented. And Dr. Taylor's work gave me data, science, information, inarguable evidence that not only is the brain designed to do all that I'm doing, and it's a real thing, but there are ways for me to explain it to others that can make it more understandable. I know it's not my job to convince anybody that what I do is valid. I don't have to convince anybody, but there is a temptation to, at times, especially when it's someone near and dear that is doubtful or doesn't adhere to or believe in this use of the intuition or channeling.
So this brings up a point I want to hit on now, and something that I've noticed within this channeling world is not just the doubt that you just spoke about, but as an example of this, I'll just highlight this. I'd recommend people listening, and I'll probably put this in the show notes somewhere, go watch Stephanie's TED Talk where she shared, it was 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, Stephanie? Yeah.
Yeah.
Explaining about intuitive channeling and your beautiful story. And when we're in situations like that, a limiting belief can come over us of, this is just something Stephanie can do. This channeling, this opening up to source and then sharing, that's a Stephanie thing. That's only certain people have that gift kind of thing. And I'm wondering what is your response to this, Stephanie, when someone comes up to you and says, oh, this is easy for you to say, but I don't have access. I'm not a channel. What's your response?
My response is, yes, you are. We are all channels. I have said this from the beginning. There is nothing special about me that makes it possible for me to do this that is different than anybody else that wants to learn. Most of the work for me in channeling has been getting out of my own way so that I can make space for what wishes to come through: love, source, divine energy, connection, spiritual contact. And that's something we can all do. If you want to learn to channel, you can. I tell people, I can't teach you how to channel like me, but I can teach you how to channel like you.
Yeah. That's the distinction. That's the main distinction right there. It's channeling isn't the gift. Channeling is the birthright, and the gift is how we then decide to share it. And I just share this quick little story with you, Stephanie. I had a channeling session. I have a practice every day where I open up my channel to receive either different parts of myself. An example of that would be my higher self, or outside entities I'm working with. So, for example, I work with a few ascended masters. And in my channel the other day, I was connecting to an ascended master, and I had a vision come through. I had set the intention of asking about what my path looks like in terms of sharing my gift and sharing my unique expression of my channel. And I had a vision come through of being in this dark space, but in that dark space was just my face and my expression, and not just sharing through my words, but also sharing through my body in a very new way. And I share that example to really highlight what Stephanie's saying, is that not only do we need to get out of our own way, but we need to be open to the unique expression that we are, right? The unique essence that we are, because that unique essence will help us with our unfolding in our life. What more of a share there, Stephanie, but any thoughts, any reflections on that?
That's exactly it. We each have, just like we communicate differently and we seek out different relationships and relate to people in our own ways, we dance in our own ways. This is just another form of receiving and self-expression and soul expression. So it's going to look different for everybody, but it is not inaccessible to anybody.
Yeah. Let's shift here a little bit, Stephanie. And I want to get your perspective on something. When we are in this brain world, when we're speaking about left and right, and we are trying to have this balance and bringing in this intuitive channeling conversation into the left brain, logical, analytical discussion. Often I've noticed what is missing within this conversation is the heart, is specifically the power of the heart in expanding the channel or expanding the balance that we may be trying to achieve between left and right brain. So I'm wondering, Stephanie, where does the heart come in to this brain conversation, if it comes in at all?
It's an excellent question. I believe it's part of the whole thing. We're not like these separate, divided up beings that work, where the hand moves completely independently without any impulse from the brain or we're interconnected to everyone and ourselves and integrated. So the heart is every bit as much of a channeling mechanism as the right hemisphere. I've been speaking more about the brain hemispheres because
that's where people
the data
are.
Yeah, exactly. We're in our heads. However, if you want to talk about heart research, there is phenomenal heart research out there, and the Heart Math Institute is my go-to for important information from the best scientists who show how we can bring the heart and the brain into coherence. And when we are in a state of coherence, that is the ideal state from which to channel, from which to receive, from which to spiritually connect. So there's no division here as far as I'm concerned. I believe it's working all together. I pick up on a lot of impulses and awareness through my heart. It informs me constantly. I actually believe that the heart is our most intelligent organ.
Yeah.
And that's not a popular belief in this culture, but that's mine.
Yeah. I hold that same belief, my friend. And I would encourage people listening to definitely go back and listen to some of my previous episodes. If you're new here, this is not a competition, but if it was a competition, there's a lot of conversations I've had that really backs up what Stephanie's alluding to. But this this comparison and contrast between the brain and the head, between the brain and the heart, it brings up something else that I experienced yesterday that I want to get your thoughts on. And I think other intuitive beings within the scientific community run into this roadblock. And I want to see how you approach this. When we start to get into all things brain science and by brain chemicals, that connection that you just spoke about between the brain and the heart, I think there's a lot of scientists and research and a lot of data out there that can sweep away anything mystical and justify let's just use the example of your heart expanding because the hypothalamus released a certain neurochemical, and then that link between the heart opened it, and that's why you felt that way. And within that conversation, that seemingly proves that there's not really anything mystical going on. It's just the body doing its thing. It's the brain being the organ, and there's a connection, and then that's it. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this, my friend? And how do we approach people that have a lot of very valid science, but are still sort of stuck in the material, physical side of it all?
I have chosen to engage with others around informational topics like this, doing a careful read on where they're at when we start the conversation. I have found that to be most helpful because I don't like when someone tries to nudge me out or prove me wrong of my own belief system, and I try not to do that with others. However, when it comes to the heart and the intelligence of the heart, I do get very excited about this, similar to how I do with the brain, and I can seem maybe overly enthusiastic about it. We get to keep the beliefs that work for us. And if it is working well for others to hold tightly to their belief on the brain being in a certain way, or the heart being able to, or looking at certain areas of science that prove certain things, that's the thing about science, is you can find pretty much anything to support whatever belief you're looking to support. So we don't need to, nor is it helpful to engage in argument or one-upmanship in any of this, because I can be proven wrong too with just similar research to the opposite. So I would ask this of anyone who has any beliefs about anything: is it working well for you?
Yeah.
Do you feel love moving through? Do you feel witnessed? Do you feel fulfilled in your soul's journey? Do you have a sense for what your soul's journey is all about? And if the answer is no, or not so much to any of those questions, then that's a wonderful invitation to re-examine beliefs.
Beautifully said, Stephanie. I think it highlights the nature of what a belief system is, right? A belief system is inherently closed, and an image that I like to share around it is the frog in the well knows nothing of the ocean. And you could be that frog in your well, in your very safe container of what you know, but that water could be polluted, and that water could be toxic, and you could be slowly, another analogy, slowly boiling and not being aware of it. But then when you're given the opportunity to add observation to how things are going, I think the thing that breaks us out of that belief system is not the mind, right? It's not the ego, because that's the thing that's keeping us there. It is that heart, right? Going back to the intelligence of the heart. I have recently started tuning into the Course of Miracles. I'm not sure if you've spent time down that path, my friend. And one of the big teachings is the opposite of fear which is often what we're staying within that belief system around, right? The opposite is love. And that love is found in that heart space most of the time. So it just highlights that divine intelligence. Stephanie, I'd love to switch here a little bit to another. I'm trying to work out how to classify it, and I'll say it's a fear or a concern. As we start to shift from the left brain to the right brain, and maybe we start to open up to our channel more, and we start receiving things and start receiving downloads and connecting to our higher self or entities outside of us, masters, angels, whatever it is, other people's souls. A common challenge that comes up is learning to distinguish between what is a delusion and what is a actual channel. And let me say this another way. Within the mental health realm, I think there's a lot of real fear around things like psychosis or things like, schizophrenia, right? These very real mental health challenges that also exist at the same time as this beautiful intuitive channeling conversation that we're having, and receiving things and seeing things that aren't there and hearing things that aren't there and things like that. So how do we move through this, Stephanie? How do we help people understand that this is not an or conversation? This is an and conversation.
If someone is in the beginning of their exploration with their own channeling and bringing forward messages, I really encourage that for a good long stretch of time, they stay in the practice of that simply for their own purpose, for their own expansion. I think we get into trouble and stickiness when we bring messages to others that they are not asking for, that they are not prepared for. It can actually cause harm. It can create chaos and confusion. So first, I would always say, be really clear as you begin your practice of attuning and of receiving and of tapping in and asking for support and guidance from your guides, from your higher self, from your ancestors, from whatever area you're going to, you want to channel from. Prepare yourself by creating that high vibrational frequency. For all of us, that means something a little different. But as I mentioned, radical self-care needs to be centered in there. And ritual is a way of bringing sacred to that which is common. And so heightening that. And then you use it for your benefit. Ask for that which is in the highest service. Be really clear when you are channeling that is the only thing you're going for, that which is in the highest service of myself and all beings. And if you frame your question in that way, I believe you are almost assured that the energy that comes through is going to be of the highest service. If something comes through or you sense something that feels uncomfortable for you, you have so many options there. One, you don't have to believe anything. It doesn't have to be that you place an immediate label on it, or you presume that you've been intruded upon by a nefarious, energy. Yeah. Oftentimes, we're just distracted and we're in a fearful state of mind, and that will magnetize more fearful thoughts or perceived intrusions or energy. The other things you can do is to be as specific as possible with what you're seeking. You mentioned, Harrison, that you were tuning into the Ascended Masters and asking for guidance on how you can use your light to be in service. Right. So be clear on what you're looking for. Don't go around just saying, whatever wants to come through, come through. Don't do that. Please don't do that.
I laugh because I've definitely done that, and I have seen I have seen it not go in the way that I want, and it's true. It's I share an example just to highlight this. I as part of my morning practice, my morning routine has a part of this channeling involved in it, and for a while, and I've shared this on another episode. For a while, I was inviting in. I was inviting in all of my shadows and all of my unresolved karma because, and this is actually what I was going to say to what you're saying, my friend, because I had the mask on of the superhero in regards to not someone else, but myself, right? I had the superhero mask on that I need to be doing all the things all the time because if I'm not really healing. So I was setting the intention of every day, I want all of my shadows and all of my unresolved karma to appear to me. And I was getting that. I asked my mentor at the time, why is life so hard right now? Why am I being triggered so much by everyone? And then I shared that. She's like, that's why, because you're asking, you're asking for it. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's hilarious. That sounds like a circus is what it would be for me if I gave everybody free admission to come right on in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's, I since then amended that and added the piece of coming up in their own time when they are ready. And it shows the power of intention here. And it shows that I want to go back to something else that you said. It really highlights that we are the most powerful entity in our reality, right? This, what you were explaining before about the things coming in and then us getting lost in the fear that they have control over us. That's an illusion, right? Because I often take the Vedic worldview of this, and the Vedic worldview is that there is no objective outside reality. There is just the outside reality that we project our state of consciousness onto. So what that infers is that if a negative entity comes into my reality that I'm not ready for whatever reason, I have all the power in the world to put up my boundaries, to release, to let go, to step back, to go in and do the thing that's needed. Does that resonate, my friend?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And I want to touch on one more thing
Please.
From just the previous point we were making. In my practice as a professional intuitive channel, I do not bring forward messages based on global questions. So if a client says to me, oh, just bring in whoever's here for me, I always say, no, but but I do trust, dear client, that that your heart knows, if you listen for a moment, what will be of the highest service to you. And when that image or that name or that face or that question surfaces, then let me know and I will tune into that.
Yeah. It that allow everyone to come in, that works on the positive too. Right. I often get the image of, it's a meme on Instagram. You see the earth and all these people asking for help or saying, why do I feel so alone? What's going on? And you see this army of angels that are just looking down at the earth, ready to go. And just like there is a tidal wave of shadows ready to be processed, there's also a tidal wave of loving support ready to go. So we need to be mindful of, are you ready to be overloaded by love and grace at this moment? Maybe you're not, right?
Yeah.
Stephanie, I have a few more questions here before I let you go on your beautiful day. And I've really enjoyed this chat. Your energy and your love it's very infectious. And I hope that everyone listening in is really tuning into the light that you are. I would love to ask you, heading into the future around this conversation that we've had today, mainly centered around the brain. Why is this so important right now, right? We've talked about how that, there are many cultural and collective themes that are continuing to play out in the world. But I guess what I'm asking is for you to project into the future now. And what do you see happening? What do you see happening? What is the future reality that we are stepping into within this channeling and this left and right brain balance? What do you perceive coming for us?
In my greatest imagining for our future, I see humanity as having awakened to our interconnectedness, which is undeniable, and to the fact that we are stewards of this beautiful, living, breathing planet that we are on and all life upon it. And I see on a regular basis the image of us serving together, working together, sharing total, like breaking apart of systems and structures that we already know and we've identified a long time ago as not helpful or useful any longer. And coming back to some, a simplistic, almost communal, but don't take your imagination to extreme there. In terms of how we grow our food, in terms of how we care for the life around us, in terms of being a regenerative and restorative species instead of an extractive species. And I hold that vision so clearly. I do believe that it's possible. I will serve in every way I can think of to that end, because we are given this very unique opportunity to show up to that now. And I can feed myself on the despair and on the destruction and on the losses, and that has its own detriment to me and my psyche and my spirit. Or I can keep seeing the beautiful things that are already transforming and happening for and on behalf of humanity. We're not alone. We're never alone. We have everything we need. We know everything we need to know in this moment to make these shifts and come home to this beautiful interbeing.
I think this is a vision I know that I share with Stephanie. I see that so vividly, the way that you describe it. And right before 2020 and everything happened, everything that happened in the subsequent years that we've all experienced, that vision was really projected onto me. Even before I was, before the show, before all the things I do now, I saw that vision so clearly. Some people call it the new earth. Some people call it the 3D to 5D shift, the archangel. There's many names for the same vision that I think we're all stepping into. And it brings up a question, my friend, because we've spoken so much about the brain and the mental scape today. Just for people listening, at the time of this episode release, I'll have my first book will be out in the world. And one of my chapters in the book is the longest road we'll ever take. And the longest road we'll ever take is from the head to the heart. And I'm wondering, for you, Stephanie, when you see this future shift that we're all moving into, do you think that journey will be decreased? Do you think that that path that we'll take from the head to the heart, with a lot of that fear and illusion and trauma, do you think that won't be such an ordeal in this new world that we're shifting into?
Absolutely. I can't imagine it having such a role in the new earth. I like to call it that as well. And I also believe that we have covered a lot of ground that we're not present to because of the news cycles, because of where our attention is constantly being directed. But when I take the time and I dig about and I connect with those organizations and people and founders and charities, et cetera, that are in the trenches doing the work, I realize, oh, that's right. There's so much strength here. It's a tipping point we're after. We're not looking to convince everybody or transform everybody. It's going to be a tipping point where there's just the shift, and then it becomes the new norm. And then this is just how we live and how we behave.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think we're aiming for the 10%. I think it's the 10% we're aiming for, to have that global, that awakened consciousness, and that's achieved. That's enough to sway the rest, right? And they can continue doing what they're doing. The 10% is enough. Stephanie, thank you for your time today. It's been a divine pleasure to connect to you. And I'm so grateful for our mutual friend, Claudia. Shout out to Claudia if you're listening. It's been so nice to tune into your work and the lovely soul that you are in this world. If people have really tuned into your heart and been attracted to who you are in this world, they want to find out more, they want to connect to you, where would you like to direct them?
They can go to my website. It is soulinsight.com.
I know that you're planning to do a talk coming up soon. Is that correct? Do you want to speak about it?
Yes, I actually plan to do another TEDx talk, and it's going to be more about the brain, just like what we discussed here, but with some very personal stories and examples with regards to how I chose the right hemisphere for my point of engagement and how it transformed my experiences.
Is that TEDx talk scheduled in at this point in time?
Not yet, but it's coming.
Okay. So at the time of this release, just look up Stephanie's work and it might be already out. So I'm so excited, my friend. I can't wait to see what happens with that expression. Stephanie, my last question for you today is, this is the Cosmic Love Antenna, and a big part of my mission here right now in this world is to illuminate the higher consciousness and higher power that is love in our world, and the love that we can really come home to as God, divine, unity consciousness, your higher power. So I'm wondering, Stephanie, in your world, in your reality, how do you define that love word personally?
I'm going to define it with one word, which encompasses everything for me, and that is interbeing.
Mm-hmm. Just letting it sit for a second, and I visualized that as soon as you said it. Stephanie, I love you very much. Thank you for your time today, beautiful beings. Thank you for giving us your attention out there in the podcast world. If this brought you value, hit your heart, expanded some awareness for you, please share this out with someone you care with very much. Regardless, we love you unconditionally. Until next time here on the show, we send you love, we send you light, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.